Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we are going to discuss why are Indian cough syrups in use and under scrutiny. Now the notes that I will be using in this session, if you want to download them, they will be made available on this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. So you can search ATS Live in the search bar of your Telegram app, find the channel and download the notes from there. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. Let us start by understanding why are we taking up the issue of Indian cough syrups in our today's discussion. Now, how many of you remember few days back, at least 14 children in the district of Chindwara in Madhya Pradesh have died after they consumed adulterated Indian-made cough syrup. And this tragedy, which has happened now in India, is not an isolated event. If you can recall, few years back in countries like Gambia, in countries like Uzbekistan, similar deaths have happened after children consumed Indian-made cough syrup. So the issue of health and safety of Indian-made cough syrup is a very big issue, which we'll try to understand in our today's video. Now let us understand what was the cause of the death of these children that happened in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And the reason is consumption of an adulterated Indian-made cough syrup. And this Indian-made cough syrup was known to be adulterated by a toxic chemical known as diethylene glycol. Now you need to understand the reason of death happened because they consumed a particular brand's cough syrup which is marketed as ColdRif. Now this diethylene glycol that I was talking about is an industrial chemical which is used as a solvent in many chemicals that are made for antifreeze purposes, for brake fluids, as well as in automobile coolants. Now you need to understand this is an industrial chemical, so it is highly toxic in nature, and if human consumes it or ingests it somehow, it leads to many health related problems. For example, you'll face abdominal pain, vomiting, nausea, as well as altered mental and psychological state if you consume them. Similarly, the effects of this chemical is much more prominent in children because they can face acute kidney failure, which can even lead to death of the child. And this is what has happened. Now the WHO, World Health Organization, it has set a limit that yes, presence of diethylene glycol in small numbers, that is up to 0.1% of volume, is acceptable. Beyond that, it can become harmful. And you know that cough syrup which led to death of these children, they were found to be having 48.6% of diethylene glycol. So you can understand how highly it was contaminated. Okay, but now you might think, how does this chemical found its way in Indian made cough syrup? There is a very good reason for it. Now I need to understand the cough syrup is made by adding multiple ingredients. So as to dissolve these multiple ingredients, you need a chemical that acts as a solvent. And this property is discharged by another chemical known as propylene glycol. So it acts as a solvent which helps the cough syrup dissolve multiple ingredients in it. Now propylene glycol is available in two different variants. First is for pharmaceutical purposes, which is much more edible in nature. Now this pharmaceutical propylene glycol is very much pure in nature, and the presence of diethylene glycol in this particular pharmaceutical grade propylene glycol is under WHO limits, that it should be less than 0.1% of dg per volume of the cough syrup. Now another variant of this propylene glycol is used for industrial related purposes, and this industrial related propylene glycol is cheaper, so hence it can be contaminated with DG because it is not used for human consumption process, right? So these are two DGs that are available, and you can understand mostly the cough syrup that are made in India, they use pharmaceutical grade propylene glycol. So how did this pharmaceutical grade propylene glycol, which is pure, led to high contamination of DG? Let us find out. Now, in order to cut the cost, many times many cough syrup companies, they use cheaper industrial grade propylene glycol, and in this glycol I've told you the presence of DG can be much above the safe limits that has been imposed by the WHO. On the other hand, there is also a frequency that many companies who make these cough syrups, they don't test their raw material whether that raw material has presence of DG in it. So these two are the reasons which may have led to the deaths of these children who consumed adulterated DEG variant of the cough syrup, right? So this is what has happened. Now why this problem became, or what led to this wrong? Let us discuss that. There must be certain shortcomings in our regulatory structure, right? First of all, how did the company get away with putting adulterated cough syrup? Then why was our regulatory structure not able to detect the supply of such spurious cough syrup? That poses a big question. So let us understand what are the reasons that led to this problem. The first reason is the fragmented nature of our drug regulation system. Now, drug regulation in India is regulated by a particular act known as Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. But you need to understand the issue of public health is a state subject, which is given in the Schedule 7th of the Indian Constitution. So it is the state government which is responsible for ensuring public health. So the Central Drug Regulating Company, CDSCO, it is responsible for setting of overall standards, giving approvals, as well as recognizing exports of drugs outside the country, right? But when it comes to regulation of drug manufacturers inside a state, it is the responsibility of state government, which is responsible for licensing, conducting inspections of drug factories, as well as enforcement of drug standards, as well as Drugs Cosmetics Act. So it is the responsibility of state government. Now, what happens when the drug regulation system itself is fragmented, when it is given to two different entities in state and union? So it leads to a fragmented drug structure, and therefore in reality it leads to poor coordination between these two drug regulatory authorities, and it leads to weak enforcement of drug standards as well as laws. Now, what has happened in real life, that when you see, it is the state government responsible for regulating and conducting inspections, but these inspections have not been regular, they have been infrequent. So therefore the adulterated cough syrup may have been passed because of these irregular enforcement and inspection. Similarly, whenever certain drug manufacturers are found using substandard products, the penalties that are imposed on them are very low, so it does not disincentivize them to use adulterated stuff. So this is the problem with the drug regulation system in the country. Similarly, there are many situational problems also. One situational problem is that India has a limited capacity to test the raw materials which might be coming from another country. So in many cases, whenever these propylene glycol, whenever they are imported from another country, India does not have the capacity to test these raw materials at the port itself. And therefore, the responsibility of testing is shifted to the companies themselves. If the companies are having a very stringent checking process, certification process, they would find the spurious raw material. But in case the testing is not inadequate or it's inadequate, it would lead to passing away of these spurious raw materials into their final products. And this is what has happened in India, because small drug makers like the one who are manufacturing ColdRif cough syrup, they often lack testing facilities which is required to detect such DEG which is present in the cough syrup. This is called as gas chromatography. So if they don't have this ability, they won't be able to find DEG if it is there in their raw material which is imported. And therefore this improper availability of testing leads to passage of spurious raw material into the cough syrup that we have seen, right? So this is what has went wrong. Now, what are the steps that the regulatory as well as the administrative authority has taken after this incident has taken place? There have been many steps. So, for example, the sale of this cough syrup which led to death, ColdRif, has been banned in many states. Madhya Pradesh, after all, it has imposed ban on all Scrutiny Pharma products, which is the company manufacturing this ColdRif cough syrup. They have registered a criminal case against the firm itself, and they have also arrested a doctor who prescribed this medicine. Similarly, in state of Rajasthan, they have suspended, not fired, suspended 2 health officials and a state drug controller for negligence in the regulatory structure. Now, what this gives an impression, yes, they have taken an action, but after the deaths have happened. So this is basically a firefighting approach. What we ideally want is not a firefighting approach from the administration, from the drug regulatory authorities, but rather a fireproofing approach. So this is what was needed. Rather, what has happened is the firefighting approach, which is not adequate in the state or in the sensitive area like drug regulation. Okay. So in addition to that, the Union Health Ministry has ordered inspection that the syrup manufacturers across 6 states, there would be spurious inspection of all these facilities. Similarly, they've also issued an advisory to the healthcare professionals that if the children who comes to you are under 2 years of age, you should avoid prescribing cough syrup because of the negative impact it may have on the children's health. So once again, I told you, the government, both state and central, have taken approach after the deaths have happened, not before the deaths have happened, which could have avoided this unforeseen event, right? Now, what is the broader implication of this incident? First of all, is the state of public health in our country. Now, whatever drug is manufactured in India and supplied to people, it needs to be safe, especially for children, right? And this gives you an impression that the pharmaceutical quality assurance in India is not adequate, rather it is poor. On the other hand, you also need to know that India is considered as a pharmacy of the world, where Indian-made medicines are supplied to developed, developing as well as least developed countries. So the Indian pharma industry as a whole needs to protect its damage, or it needs to protect its reputation. On the other hand, when such incidences have happened in India and in other countries, it creates a negative image of your pharmaceutical industry. It damages the reputation that you have formed over the period of decades. So this is a setback for India's pharmaceutical industry as well as for India's export potential. Now, on the government side, what you need is a single window, not fragmented, but a centralized drug safety mechanism, which would be able to enforce the policies, which would be able to create standards, and which would be able to conduct timely inspections. Similarly, you also need strong enforcement mechanism, and you can do so by implementing the World Health Organization's good manufacturing practices and conducting testing of raw materials at the point of their entry into the country, and not leave this responsibility to the drug companies themselves, because they also have to take care of their cost. And if they try to avoid testing of their raw materials, you know what will happen, the deaths like that have happened in Madhya Pradesh, right? So this was all for today's discussion. Before solving the practice question, I need to tell you something, especially for students who are looking to give exams in the year 2027 and 28, we have long-term courses for you. If you take admissions to these courses, you get already a head start as against other competitors of your student, right? So once you start your classes as early as possible, it would give you sufficient time to prepare for this exam. We know this is a very lengthy exam. The process itself is very lengthy, and the amount of studies that you have to do is quite tiring. So get a head start with our courses. These are available at a discounted rate because of the festivals. To get the discounted rate, you need to apply the code ATS Live. If you need any help, there's also a number which might be flashing, 7240231070. Use that number, call that number and get help, okay? Now, this is the practice question that I want all of you to solve. Please do let me know the correct answer of this question in the comment section, and the ones who answer it correctly, you will get a thumbs up from my side. So this is all for our today's discussion. Once again, if you want to download the notes, they will be available on this channel. If you have problems locating it, you can scan the QR code also. So this is all from my side. Please have a very good night.